Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
Sadie didn't just serve coffee, she served magic in ceramic cups. Every latte had a heart drawn in foam, sometimes a rosetta if she was feeling fancy. Every glance from her felt like a secret handed to me under the table, something precious I needed to guard with my life. I'd been haunting Desert Dawn for 3 weeks before I worked up the courage to actually order something beyond basic coffee. The first time I saw her, she was arguing with the espresso machine, her dark curls escaping from a messy bun, swearing under her breath in what sounded like Spanish mixed with pure frustration. When she finally coaxed the perfect shot from that temperamental beast, she looked up and caught me staring. "Sorry about the show," she said, not looking sorry at all. "Rodrigo here has commitment issues." "Rodrigo?" "The machine. We have a complicated relationship." She gestured to the chrome monstrosity behind her. "He's moody, demanding, and occasionally brilliant. Basically my type in appliances." I laughed despite myself, and something shifted. In her expression, a softness I hadn't expected. "What can I get you?" she asked, and I swear her voice had dropped half an octave. "Just ... whatever you recommend." She studied me for a moment, head tilted like she was reading something written across my forehead. "You look like a lavender oat milk latte kind of person. Am I right?" I had no idea what that even meant, but I nodded anyway. Watching her work was like watching a dancer who happened to know her way around steamed milk. Every movement deliberate, confident, graceful. When she handed me the cup ceramic, not paper, with a perfect leaf etched in foam our fingers brushed, electric, cliché, but true. "I'm Sadie," she said. I paused, realizing I'd forgotten how to speak. "I'm Riley." "Well, Riley, enjoy your drink. And next time, don't look so terrified when you walk in here. I don't bite." A pause, and that mischievous smile again. Much. I spent the next 2 hours in the corner booth, nursing that latte and pretending to write while actually stealing glances at her. She moved behind that counter like she owned the world, chatting with regulars, remembering orders, making everyone feel like they were the most interesting person she'd talked to all day. And maybe they were. When I finally worked up the nerve to approach the counter again, she raised an eyebrow. "Either you're stalking me, or you really like our lavender oat milk." Heat flooded my cheeks. I just needed somewhere quiet too. "Right, writer, huh? What kind?" "Poetry, mostly." "Nothing good." She leaned against the counter, chin propped on her hand. "I bet that's not true. What do you write about?" "Life, love, the crushing weight of student debt." That earned me another laugh. "Right now I'm working on a series about urban loneliness and how we're all just pretending we know what we're doing." Cheerful, I'm a blast at parties. Something in her expression shifted, became more serious. "You know what? We're actually hiring. Nothing glamorous, mostly opening shifts and cleanup. But it pays, and you get to write between customers. Plus, I could use someone around here who understands that coffee is an art form, not just caffeine." "Delivery?" She slid a job application across the counter, and I stared at it like it might burst into flames. "I don't know anything about coffee," I admitted. "I can teach you coffee, can't teach someone to be genuine." She tapped the application with one finger, nail painted deep purple. "Think about it." I thought about my empty bank account, my patient, but increasingly concerned landlord, the way she'd looked at me like I was worth knowing. I thought about spending my days in this warm, honey-colored space that smelled like cinnamon and possibility. When do I start? My first shift was a disaster of epic proportions. I burned my hand on the steam wand within the first hour, mixed up 3 orders in a row, and somehow managed to get coffee grounds in my hair. But Sadie's laughter made it all feel like an adventure instead of a catastrophe. Everyone has a first day story, she said, wrapping ice in a dish towel for my scalded palm. Mine involved setting a croissant on fire and accidentally serving decaf to a customer who specifically asked for enough caffeine to resurrect the dead. What happened? Let's just say I learned that day that lawyers without proper caffeine are a force of nature, and not the good kind. She secured the ice pack with gentle fingers. But I also learned that most people are more forgiving than you expect, especially if you own up to your mistakes and maybe comp their next drink. She was right. The customers were understanding, even amused by my obvious newness. Mrs. Chun, who came in every morning at 7:30 sharp for a double shot cortado, patted my shoulder when I apologized for the third time about the wait. Honey, she said, I've been drinking coffee longer than you've been alive. I can wait 2 extra minutes for someone who cares enough to get it right. Sadie taught me everything. How to read the crema on an espresso shot, the difference between microfoam and that sad, flat milk you get when you don't steam properly, the secret to their signature cinnamon blend. But more than technique, she taught me how to see people. That guy in the corner, she said during a quiet afternoon, nodding toward a man in a rumpled suit staring at his laptop. Comes in every Tuesday, always orders a large black coffee and sits in the same spot. Never makes eye contact, never smiles. What do you see? I studied him for a moment. Someone having a rough day. Look closer. I watched him type, noticed the way his shoulders curved inward, the dark circles under his eyes, the wedding ring. He kept turning on his finger. Divorce papers, I said suddenly. He's working on divorce papers? Sadie nodded. 3rd Tuesday in a row. Same routine, same seat. I think he comes here because it's neutral territory, not his place or hers. Somewhere he can just exist while his world falls apart. That's heartbreaking, it is. But it's also why we do what we do. Sometimes a perfect cup of coffee is the only good thing in someone's day. Sometimes a smile from a stranger is the difference between making it through and not making it through. I started to understand what she meant. The tired mother juggling twins and a phone call who nearly cried with relief when I remembered she liked an extra shot in her latte. The college student cramming for finals who relaxed visibly when I didn't rush him even though there was a line. The elderly man who came in every Sunday, always ordered tea instead of coffee, and just wanted someone to ask about his grandkids. We weren't just serving drinks. We were serving moments of connection in a world that felt increasingly disconnected. Real shift happened during closing. Desert Dawn stayed open until 9 on weeknights, and as the newest hire, I got stuck with the cleanup shifts. I didn't mind the extra hours helped with rent, and there was something peaceful about the cafe. After the last customer left, just me, the soft jazz Sadie always put on after hours, and the gentle hum of the dishwasher working through the day's accumulation of cups and saucers. But then Sadie started staying late too. Just want to make sure you're not burning the place down, she said the first time, but her grin gave her away. I only did that once, I protested, and it was barely smoke. Famous last words. We developed a routine. She'd handle the money and close out the register while I cleaned the espresso machine and wiped down tables. We'd meet in the middle, literally and figuratively, both of us gravitating toward the large center table where we'd count tips and plan the next day's specials. Those hours felt stolen, precious. The outside world disappeared, leaving just the two of us in our warm bubble of ceramic and conversation. We talked about everything, her family's cafe in El Salvador, where she'd learned to love coffee, my failed attempts at grad school, and the poetry professor who told me I had potential but lacked focus, the dreams we carried and the fears that kept us awake at night. I never intended to stay here this long. she admitted one evening, legs curled under her in the booth by the window. I was supposed to save money for business school, maybe open my own place someday. That was 3 years ago. What changed? She was quiet for a moment, looking out at the streetlights beginning to flicker on. I think I got comfortable. This place, this routine, it's safe, predictable. I know how to be good at this job. You're more than good at it. You're amazing. Am I? She turned to look at me then, something vulnerable in her expression. Sometimes I feel like I'm just hiding here. Like I'm too scared to find out if I could actually build something of my own. I wanted to tell her that fear was just proof she cared about something deeply enough for it to matter. I wanted to tell her that watching her work was like watching someone who was born to create beautiful things, whether that was the perfect cappuccino or something bigger. Instead, I said, I think being scared means you're paying attention. The things worth doing are usually terrifying. Is that from one of your poems? Maybe it will be. She smiled at that, and something shifted in the air between us. Awareness, electric and dangerous. Speaking of poems, she said, I know you've been writing about me. My heart stopped. What, Riley? I've watched you write for weeks now. You get this look on your face like you're trying to capture something fleeting, and you only get that look when you're watching me work. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. So either I'm incredibly inspiring, or you're documenting my coffee-making techniques for some sort of barista tell-all. I don't. Read me something. The request hung in the air between us. I could feel my notebook in my back pocket, the pages filled with verses about the way morning light caught in her hair, the rhythm of her movements, the sound of her laugh. All of it too revealing, too raw. I can't. Why not? Because they're all about you, I wanted to say. Because every poem is just another way of trying to figure out if what I feel is real, or if I'm just lonely and projecting. Because I'm terrified. You'll hear them and see everything I'm trying to hide. Instead, I pulled out my notebook with shaking hands. This one's called Morning Rituals, I said, flipping to a page I'd read so many times the corners were soft with wear. Asterisk, she measures coffee like she's measuring time, precise, deliberate, each scoop a small prayer to the morning gods who decide whether today will be bitter or sweet. Her hands know the weight of water, the exact temperature that transforms ordinary beans into something close to magic. I watch her work and wonder if this is what reverence looks like. The careful attention to small things that make life worth living. When she hands me my cup, fingers brushing mine for just a moment, I think maybe I understand faith, not in grand gestures or cosmic plans, but in the daily miracle of choosing to create something beautiful for a stranger who might need exactly this warmth, exactly this moment, exactly this kindness. Asterisk. I looked up when I finished, and Sadie's eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them. You're wrong, she said softly. About what? About being a stranger. She stood up, came around to my side of the table, and about me not wanting you back. The words hit me like a physical force. Everything I'd been holding back, all the careful distance I'd tried to maintain, crumbled. Sadie. She was close now, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, could smell her perfume mixed with the lingering scent of coffee and cinnamon. I've been wanting to kiss you for weeks, she whispered. Every time you hand me a cup, every time you laugh at something I say, every time you get that concentrated look when you're trying to make the phone just right. I kept thinking maybe I was imagining it the way you look at me. You're not imagining it. Good, she said, and then she kissed me. Soft at first, tentative, like she was asking a question. Then I kissed her back, and the question became an answer, became a yes that had been building in my chest for weeks. She tasted like coffee and possibility, and when she pulled me closer, the table edge digging into my hips, I felt like I was finally exactly where I belonged. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against mine. "So," she said, voice husky, "what happens now?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I've never been good at the what happens next part. Lucky for you, I am." She kissed me again, brief and sweet. "We figure it out as we go." What happened next was 3 months of stolen moments that felt like living in a beautiful secret. We were careful at work, professional, friendly, giving no indication that we were spending our nights tangled in her sheets or mine, whispering confessions in the dark like teenagers with a curfew. Sadie lived in a studio apartment above a vintage bookstore, all exposed brick and tall windows that caught the morning light like a net. I loved waking up there, loved the way she made coffee for us using a French press and precise measurements. The same care she brought to everything else. "You know," she said one Saturday morning, handing me a mug as I sat cross-legged on her bed, "we could tell people. About us, I mean." I looked up from the poem I'd been scribbling. "Do you want to? I want to be able to touch you when I want to touch you. I want to hold your hand when we walk to work together. I want to kiss you goodbye without looking around. First to see who's watching." The longing in her voice made my chest tight. "But," she sat down next to me, close enough that our thighs touched, "but I also love this. The secret of it. The way no one else knows that when you're making my drink, you're thinking about how I kissed your neck this morning. The way I can look at you across the cafe and remember exactly how you sound when you come." Heat flooded my cheeks. "Sadie." "What? It's true." She grinned, completely unrepentant. "Don't tell me you don't think about it too." Of course I thought about it. I thought about the way she'd pulled me into the stockroom the day before, pressed me against the shelves full of coffee beans, and kissed me breathless before returning to work like nothing had happened. I thought about the notes she'd started, leaving in my apron little drawings, inside jokes, fragments of song lyrics that made me blush. "I think about it," I admitted, "maybe too much. There's no such thing as too much when it comes to this." She set her mug aside and turned to face me fully. "Riley, I need you to know something. This isn't just ... I'm not just having fun here. This matters to me. You matter to me. You matter to me too." "Good." She kissed my cheek, sweet and chaste. "Now read me what you were writing." I looked down at my notebook, at the half-finished verse about morning light and the way love could make even ordinary moments feel sacred. "It's not done yet." "Read it anyway." So I did, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You know what I love about your poetry?" she said finally. "What?" "You see the magic in regular things. Most people rush through their days, miss all the small beautiful moments, but you notice them. You pay attention." She traced a finger along the spine of my notebook. "It makes me want to pay attention too." That's how it was between us. She made me braver, and I made her more thoughtful. She encouraged me to submit my work to literary magazines, helped me craft cover letters even when rejection felt inevitable. I encouraged her to research business loans, to start sketching out ideas for the cafe she still dreamed about opening. We spent evenings at her kitchen table, me editing poems while she worked on spreadsheets and floor plans, our feet tangled together under the small table. Sometimes she'd read over my shoulder, suggesting a word change or asking about a metaphor. Sometimes I'd look up from my laptop to find her staring at her numbers, chewing on the end of her pen. "Penny for your thoughts," I'd say, and she'd always smile. Just wondering if I'm crazy for thinking I could actually do this. The only crazy thing would be not trying. But underneath all that domestic bliss, I could feel something building. The weight of secrets, maybe, or the simple fact that intense things can't stay perfectly contained forever. Something was going to shift, and I wasn't sure we were ready for it. The shift came on a Tuesday in October, when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I deleted but still recognized. "Hey, I know it's been a while. I'm in town and I've been thinking about us. Can we talk, Marcus? My ex-boyfriend, the one who'd convinced me to follow him to grad school, then decided 6 months later that he needed space to find himself. A space had apparently led him to a sophomore named Jessica and a sudden revelation that commitment wasn't his thing after all. I stared at the message during my break, sitting in the alley behind Desert Dawn with my heart hammering against my ribs. You look like you've seen a ghost, Sadie said, coming out with 2 cups of tea. Something like that. I took the tea gratefully, used the warmth to steady my shaking hands. Want to talk about it? I showed her the message, watched her expression shift from concern to carefully neutral. Are you going to respond? I don't know. Maybe I should delete it. Or maybe you should hear what he has to say. She sat down next to me on the milk crate that served as our makeshift break room furniture. Sometimes the only way to close a door is to open it first. You wouldn't be jealous if I met up with him? She was quiet for a moment, looking out at the narrow alley with its dumpster and fire escapes, and the kind of urban decay that somehow felt romantic in the right light. I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't feel something, she said finally. But I trust you, and I trust what we have. She turned to look at me, brown eyes serious. But Riley, if you're going to do this, you need to be honest with yourself about why. What do you mean? I mean, are you meeting him because you need closure? Because you want to show him how well you're doing? Or because some part of you is still hoping he'll want you back? The question landed like a punch. I don't want him back. Are you sure? Was I? Looking at the message again, I tried to examine my reaction honestly. The flutter of nerves, the immediate cascade of memories, his laugh, the way he used to read over my shoulder while I wrote, the morning I'd woken up to find half. His things already gone, and a note on the kitchen counter explaining that he'd realized we wanted different things. I'm sure, I said, and meant it, but I think I need to prove that to myself. Sadie nodded like she understood. Okay, but can I ask one favor? Anything. Whatever happens, whatever he says, remember that you're not the same person who let him walk away. You're stronger now. You're building something real, something good. She reached over and took my hand. And you're not alone this time. I met Marcus at a neutral cafe across town somewhere that didn't smell like cinnamon and possibility. Somewhere that wouldn't be contaminated by whatever conversation we were about to have. He looked the same. Tall, dark hair that was probably expensively cut to look casually messy. The kind of smile that had once made my knees weak and now just made me tired. Riley. He stood up when I walked in like he was going to hug me. I sat down across from him instead. Marcus, you said you wanted to talk. Right to business, huh? He sat back down, still smiling. I miss that about you. No games, no pretense. What do you want? He ordered us both coffee presumptuous, but I didn't correct him and launched into what I slowly realized was a prepared speech. He'd been doing a lot of thinking lately, he said. A lot of soul-searching. He realized that leaving me had been a mistake, that he'd been scared of how serious things were getting between us, that Jessica had been a distraction from the real issue, his fear of commitment. But I'm ready now, he said, reaching across the table for my hand. I pulled it back. I'm ready to be the partner you deserve. I know I hurt you, and I know I don't deserve another chance, but you want one anyway? I want you back, Riley. I want us back. I stared at him, this man who had once been the center of my universe, who had shaped my dreams around his plans, and then disappeared when those dreams became inconvenient. The strange thing was how little I felt. No anger, no longing, no desire for revenge or reconciliation. Just a kind of distant curiosity, like I was observing someone else's life. Do you know what I do now? I asked. He blinked. I know. Are you still writing? I work at a coffee shop. I make lattes and clean tables and win people's regular orders. It's not prestigious or intellectually impressive, but I love it. That's great. A day job is important for artists. The condescension in his voice crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't name. It's not a day job, Marcus. It's my life. I have friends there, people who care about me, work that feels meaningful. I have a routine I love and goals that are mine, not borrowed from someone else's vision of what my life should look like. But surely you want more than just, I am more. I'm more than I ever was with you. I stood up, suddenly clear about what I needed to say. You're right, that we wanted different things. I wanted someone who saw me as a partner, not a project. I wanted someone who wouldn't disappear when love got real and complicated. I wanted someone who wouldn't ask me to make myself smaller so they could feel bigger. Riley, that's not fair. Isn't it? I picked up my bag, left money for my untouched coffee. I hope you find what you're looking for, Marcus. I really do, but it's not me. Not anymore. I walked out feeling lighter than I had in months, like I'd been carrying something heavy without realizing it and had finally set it down. When I got back to the cafe, Sadie took one look at my face and steered me into the back office. How did it go? Better than I expected, clearer. I sat down on the ancient couch we kept back there for breaks. He wanted to get back together. I saw her tense, just slightly. And I realized I didn't want him to want me back. I didn't need his validation or his apology or his sudden revelation that I was worth sticking around for. I looked up at her, this woman who had seen all my messy edges and stayed anyway. I realized I already have what I wanted with him, except real this time. Relief flooded her face. Yeah. I stood up, crossed to where she was leaning, against the desk. I love you, Sadie, not the idea of you, not the fantasy version I built in my head, but the actual you. The way you argue with the espresso machine and leave love notes in my apron and make me feel like the most interesting person in the room, even when I'm covered in coffee grounds and self-doubt. I love you too, she said, voice soft with wonder. God, I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Good scared or bad scared? Good scared. The kind that means something matters. We kissed then, and it tasted like relief and promise, and the particular sweetness of choosing someone who chooses you back. But our relief was short-lived. The next week brought a different kind of crisis, one that threatened the foundation we'd built our relationship on. The cafe was struggling. It had been struggling for a while, actually, but Desert Dawn's owner, Frank, had been good at hiding it. Rising rent, increased competition from a chain coffee shop that had opened 2 blocks away, the slow but steady erosion of regular customers who were drawn to cheaper alternatives or more convenient locations. Frank called a staff meeting on a Thursday afternoon after the lunch rush had died down. There were only 5 of us, Frank, Sadie, me, Marcus. Not my ex, a different Marcus who worked mornings, and Jenna, who handled most of the baking. I'm going to be straight with you all, Frank said, looking older than his 65 years. We're in trouble. I've been trying to keep us afloat, but the numbers don't lie. If things don't turn around in the next 2 months, I'm going to have to close. The silence that followed felt like a physical weight. What about cutting hours? Jenna asked. Or reducing the menu. I've run those numbers too. It might buy us another month, but it's not a solution. Sadie spoke up from where she was sitting next to me, her hand finding mine under the table. What if we tried to rebrand? Appeal to a different market? With what money? Frank's voice was gentle but realistic. Any major changes would require capital we don't have. I watched Sadie's face as the reality settled in. This place that had been her home base for 3 years, where she'd learned to be confident in her skills and dreams, where we'd fallen in love, it was all going to disappear. After the meeting, after Frank had gone home and the others had left, Sadie and I sat in the empty cafe surrounded by the ghosts of all the conversations and connections that had happened within these walls. I should have seen this coming, she said, staring at the espresso machine she'd named Rodrigo. The slow mornings, the way Frank kept putting off repairs, the fact that he hadn't updated anything in years. This isn't your fault. Isn't it? I'm the assistant manager. I should have been paying attention to more than just the daily operations. I turned to face her fully. Sadie, you're not responsible for saving a business that was struggling long before you got here. But I could have tried. I could have suggested changes, pushed for improvements, done something other than just existing here. I recognized the self-blame, the way she was turning inward and making this about her own perceived failures. It was the same spiral I'd been caught in after Marcus left. The voice that whispered that if I'd just been better somehow, different somehow, the outcome would have been different too. Hey, I said, taking her hands. Remember what you told me about paying attention to small things, about how sometimes a perfect cup of coffee is the only good thing in someone's day? She nodded. You didn't just exist here. You created something beautiful, something that mattered to people. Mrs. Chun is going to be heartbroken when she finds out. That guy who comes in every Tuesday, where is he going to go to work through his divorce papers? All those customers who became regulars not because of the location or the prices, but because you made them feel seen and welcome and cared for. Tears were running down her cheeks now. But it's not enough, is it? All that caring, all those relationships. They don't save the business. No, I admitted. But they save people, and sometimes that's more important than business. We sat in silence for a while, holding hands across the table where we'd shared so many late-night conversations. I have an idea, Sadie said suddenly. It's crazy and it probably won't work, but ... Tell me, what if we tried to buy the place? I stared at her. With what money? I don't know. Loans, investors, a Kickstarter campaign. She was getting animated now, the way she did when an idea really grabbed her. We could turn it into the bookstore cafe hybrid I've been dreaming about. Poetry readings, local art on the walls, a space for people to come not just for coffee, but for community. Sadie ... double quotes. I know it sounds impossible. I know we don't have business experience or startup capital or any of the things you're supposed to have, but we know this place. We know what works and what doesn't. We know the customers, the neighborhood, the potential. I looked around the cafe, trying to imagine it transformed. More bookshelves, a small stage in the corner for readings, maybe local artists displaying their work on rotation. A place where coffee and literature and human connection could coexist. What would we call it? I asked. Hope flared in her eyes. You're actually considering this? I'm considering it. We'd be insane to try it, but maybe we'd be more insane not to. Poet's Perch, she said immediately. We'd call it Poet's Perch. The next 3 months were a controlled chaos of renovation, planning, and the kind of exhausted excitement that comes from throwing yourself completely into something you believe in. We kept Desert Dawn open during the transition, serving coffee and pastries while contractors worked around us to transform the space. The physical changes were dramatic but carefully considered. We knocked out a wall to create more seating, installed floor-to-ceiling bookshelves along one side of the cafe, and created a small stage area where the old storage closet used to be. Sadie insisted on keeping Rodrigo, the temperamental espresso machine, but we upgraded almost everything else. New grinders, a better sound system, lighting that could shift from bright and energizing during the day to warm and intimate for evening events. The books were perhaps the most exciting part. We reached out to local authors, independent publishers, and literary organizations to curate a collection that reflected our community's diversity and interests. Poetry, of course, but also local history, memoirs, fiction by regional authors, and a carefully chosen selection of classics and contemporary works. I want people to discover books here the way they discover new music. Sadie explained to our contractor, who was helping us figure out the optimal placement for the shelves. Something they might never have picked up otherwise, something that changes how they see the world. We also kept the personal touches that had made Desert Dawn special, the mismatched furniture, the local art on the walls, the plants that somehow thrived despite inconsistent watering. But we added new elements too. A community bulletin board, a small lending library for customers who couldn't afford to buy books, and a partnership with a local high school's creative writing program that would bring students in for monthly workshops. During this time, our relationship deepened in ways I hadn't expected. Working 18-hour days together could have been a disaster. I'd heard horror stories about couples who couldn't survive the stress of starting a business together. But for us, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. We developed a rhythm, a way of communicating in shorthand that covered everything from aesthetic decisions to financial concerns to the thousand small crises that come with renovation projects. When I got overwhelmed by the permits and paperwork, Sadie would take over while I focused on the creative elements. When she started spiraling about whether we were making the right choices, I could pull her back to the bigger picture. "You know what I love about this?" she said one evening as we sat among the construction debris, sharing takeout Chinese food and planning the menu for our grand opening. "The dust, the constant noise, the way we haven't had a proper date in 6 weeks." She laughed. "I love that we're building something together. Not just the business, but us. We're creating this thing that wouldn't exist without both of us, and every decision we make is a choice to trust each other. Even when I vetoed your idea for neon pink accent walls, especially then, that showed excellent judgment and prevented what would have been a very expensive mistake. 3 days before our scheduled grand opening, I had a panic attack. Not a small one, not the manageable anxiety that had been my constant companion for months. A full-blown, can't breathe, vision going dark, panic attack that hit me while I was arranging books on the poetry shelf. Sadie found me crouched behind the counter, hyperventilating into a paper bag. "Riley, baby, what's happening?" "I can't do this," I gasped. "I can't. What if nobody comes? What if we fail? What if we lose everything and end up broken? Up and everyone knows we're failures?" She sat down next to me on the floor, not trying to fix it or talk me out of it, just being present while I spiraled. "Okay," she said when I finally started breathing normally again. "Let's say all that happens. Let's say we fail spectacularly, lose all our money, and have to move back in with our parents. That's supposed to make me feel better. Let's say that happens," she continued. "Would you regret trying?" I thought about it, really thought about it. The months of planning, the late nights, the way she looked when she talked about our vision, the messages from our Kickstarter supporters. "No," I said finally. "I regret not trying more than I regret failing." "Good, because that's the only thing we can really control, whether we try or not. The rest is just life, and we'll figure it out as we go, whatever happens." She was right, of course. We'd figure it out together the way we'd been doing all along. Poet's Perch opened on a Saturday morning in March, and it was nothing like I'd imagined and everything I'd hoped for. We'd worried that we wouldn't have enough customers, that people would stay away while we worked out the kinks in our new system. Instead, we had a line out the door before we even officially opened. Mrs. Chun Helen was first, naturally. ordering her usual cortado and pronouncing it even better than before. Our Kickstarter supporters came throughout the day, many of them bringing friends to show off their cafe. But the real magic happened that evening during our first official poetry reading. I'd been nervous about reading my own work. What if people thought it was self-indulgent for the co-owner to be the featured poet at the grand opening? But Sadie had insisted, and Helen had backed her up. This whole place exists because of your vision, Helen had said. People need to hear from the person who dreamed it into existence. So I stood on our small stage, looking out at a room full of people, some familiar faces, some strangers, all of them gathered in this space we'd created and read poems about. Coffee and love and the courage it takes to build something new. The poem I closed with was one I'd written during the renovation, when the space was half demolished and our future was still uncertain. Asterisk, we are building a home in the space between. Dreams and morning coffee, between the words we write in notebooks and the words we speak to strangers who might become friends. Every brick we choose, every shelf we hang, every cup we wash clean is an act of faith in tomorrow's possibilities. This is what love looks like when it grows beyond itself. Not just two people choosing each other, but two people choosing to create a place where others can choose connection over isolation, community over convenience, the slow pleasure of a perfect latte over the efficiency of instant everything. We are building a home where stories live in the walls, where every regular customer becomes part of the story we're telling, where the only thing we serve more than coffee is hope. Asterisk, the applause was warm and genuine, but what mattered more was the way Sadie looked at me from behind the counter, eyes shining with pride and love, and the particular joy that comes from seeing a dream take shape in real time. After the reading, people lingered. They browsed the books, struck up conversations with strangers, asked about our upcoming events. A woman I'd never seen before approached me while I was signing copies of a chapbook I'd self-published for the occasion. I just moved to the neighborhood, she said. I was worried I wouldn't find community here, that it would just be another place where everyone keeps to themselves. But this is exactly what I was hoping for. What's your name? I asked. Sarah. Well, Sarah, welcome to the neighborhood. And welcome to Poet's Perch. I have a feeling you're going to fit right in. Later that night, after the last customer had left and we'd finished cleaning up, Sadie and I sat in the same booth where we'd shared so many late-night conversations during our Desert Dawn days. The space looked different now, brighter, more intentional, humming with the energy of a successful beginning, but it still felt like ours. So, she said, reaching across the table to take my hand, how does it feel to be a successful business owner? Ask me in a year when we know if we're actually successful, Riley. It feels incredible, I admitted. Terrifying and incredible. And like maybe we actually did it. We did do it. Look around, we built this together. I looked around at the bookshelves lined with carefully chosen titles. The stage where I'd just shared my work, the espresso machine that was finally running smoothly, the faces of satisfied customers still lingering in my memory. You know what? The best part is, I said, what? It's not just ours anymore. It belongs to everyone who comes here, everyone who finds something they need in this space. We created it, but they're the ones who make it alive. Sadie smiled, the kind of smile that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. Spoken like a true poet. Spoken like someone who finally figured out the difference between building a life and just surviving one. I'm telling you this story 6 months after our grand opening, and I wish I could say it's been nothing but smooth sailing since then, but that would be a lie. And this whole thing started with me promising to tell you the truth about love and coffee and the messy, beautiful process of building something meaningful. The truth is that running a small business is harder than anything I'd ever done. We've had equipment breakdowns, difficult customers, staff turnover, and the constant low-level stress that comes with being responsible for other people's livelihoods. We've had arguments about everything from pricing strategies to the optimal temperature for steamed milk. We've had days when we wondered if we were in over our heads, and nights when we fell into bed, too exhausted to do anything but hold each other. But we've also had moments of pure magic. Like the evening when a shy teenage girl read her first poem at our open mic night and received a standing ovation that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Like the morning when Mr. Patterson, the elderly gentleman who comes in every Sunday, told us that our book club had helped him process his grief after his wife's death. Like the afternoon when a local author signed copies of her debut novel at a table by the window, surrounded by friends and neighbors celebrating her success. We've become exactly what I'd hoped we'd become, not just a place that serves coffee and sells books, but a place where community happens organically, where people feel safe to be themselves, where creativity and connection flourish over carefully crafted lattes and perfectly chosen words. And Sadie and I, we've learned that love isn't just the butterflies in your stomach, can't sleep feeling that brought us together. It's also the choice to keep choosing each other when things get difficult, the way we divide responsibilities based on our strengths, the quiet moments at the end of long days when we sit together and plan tomorrow's specials. It's the way she still leaves love notes on my apron, even though we see each other 18 hours a day. It's the way I still write poems about her, even though I know all her quirks and flaws and the exact way she looks when she first wakes up. It's the way we've built something bigger than either of us could have created alone, something that serves not just us, but our entire community. Last week, a young couple came in during the afternoon lull. They sat in the corner booth, the same one where Sadie and I had shared so many conversations during our Desert Dawn days, and I watched them have the kind of intense, world-shaping conversation that I recognized from my own experience. They were clearly falling in love, clearly at that stage where everything feels possible and terrifying, and like the stakes have never been higher. The woman kept tucking her hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture that reminded me of myself 6 months ago. The man kept reaching across the table like he wanted to take her hand, but didn't quite dare. I made their drinks with extra care, a lavender oat milk latte for her, a double shot cortado for him, and when I delivered them to their table, I saw the way they looked at each other, like they were standing at the edge of something vast and unknown and wonderful. "Enjoy," I said, setting down their cups. The woman looked up at me and smiled. "Thank you. This place is amazing, by the way. We've been coming here for weeks, and it just feels so warm, safe." "That's exactly what we were hoping for," I told her. Places like this, they're not just about the coffee. They're about the connections that happen over the coffee. After they left, Sadie came over to where I was wiping down tables. "New regulars?" She asked. "I think so, and I think they're falling in love." She looked toward the door where they'd just exited, then back at me. "Must be something in the water, or the coffee, or the fact that some places just make people brave enough to be honest about what they want." I thought about that as we finished our closing routine, as we turned off the lights and locked the door behind us, as we walked home together through the neighborhood that had become ours in every way that mattered. Some places make people brave enough to be honest about what they want. 1.5 years ago, I was a failed grad student living off ramen and rejection letters, too scared to even order a fancy coffee drink, let alone imagine a life where love and work and community could all coexist in the same warm, honey-colored space. Now I'm a business owner, a published poet, and most importantly, someone who has learned that the most beautiful stories don't end, they just keep beginning, one carefully crafted cup at a time.